days, from this day to that, for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
I don't see anybody that I'm willing to put my name behind. No, of course, it's been like that for a while. The one person that I was willing to was Ron Paul. Still wasn't willing to say I endorse Rand Paul, but I was at least willing to say that if it came down, Hillary versus anyone else, the only person that would have got me to the polls would have been Rand Paul. But unlike his father, again, I wouldn't have, endorsed him. I would have just said this is the person that I'd be going with. But we don't even have that. But let's throw all that to the side. One reason I got into alternative media was because of how unfair, unbalanced most of the news was. They don't use straightforward things to expose people. What they do is they sugarcoat one side and completely demonize the other side. And it was funny because I caught this on CBS News this morning. And I'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but they had one lady from Trump's campaign on, and the way they treated her and questioned her over Trump's policies was completely different than when they decided to have Tim Kaine on afterwards. They basically were kind of, I don't even know how to put it, basically trying to make her look really bad and make Trump look really bad, while right before Kaine comes on, they play this little special about all the civil rights accomplishments that Tim Kaine had, and then they have him on and they're, we're just so glad to have you, and basically giving him a blowjob right there in the studio. Versus when they had and believe me, this is Tim Kaine. This is someone that they could question his personal policies. Of course, they had nothing to question about him. Why would he do this, or why? They just championed him. and threw softball questions at him while they would throw a little bit of a hardball question at the Trump campaign woman. And then when she would answer it, it wasn't good enough. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Type attitude. It was amazing that they played both of them in the same morning where they basically showed their one-sided view, where they really didn't try to hide it by, having her on one day and then Tim came on the next. But one thing they did do, if you go to CBS's YouTube, CBS News Online, they don't have the interview with her up there, but they have the Tim Kaine on civil rights, Trump's attacks, and tightening polls. I'll play some of that, but kind of staying on topic and staying on, this election and the campaign thing, I wanted to cover Ron Paul Mythbusters. It was today's Ron Paul Liberty Report, Mythbusters. And they kind of go over both sides, Hillary and Trump and their foreign policy. And it says here, pick your foreign policy poison. And I think they both have flawed foreign policies. I would say that Hillary probably has a better understanding of what's going on right now across the world, but I don't think she has good intentions. So knowing what's going on isn't going to help. Trump, I think, has a lack of understanding, but I think there is one thing that he's somewhat willing to not just go to war. And I think a lot of that comes down to, well, he doesn't really have experience with war. Unless you call, business war. That's the only types of wars he probably has any experience with. Not the same thing. But let's go ahead and dive into this Ron Paul Liberty Report. Ron Paul Liberty Report, Mythbusters, pick your own foreign policy poison. So let's go ahead and dive
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. Today is the day we do Mythbusters, and co-host is Chris Rossini. Chris, welcome to our program today.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul. Thank you.
Good. We want to talk today a little bit about foreign policy. Foreign policy hasn't been the top issue in the presidential campaign, but lately there's been more talk about it because there are a lot of hot spots around the world. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on and see if we can figure out where the two major candidates stand.
Yes, let's start with Russia because they are the major nuclear power that we deal with. And Donald Trump has thus far presented himself as less hawkish than Hillary Clinton. He says he wants to get along with Russia. Meanwhile, Hillary has likened Putin to Hitler. So what are your thoughts on this, Dr. Paul?
Well, I'm hoping that the position that Donald holds on the Russian issue is based in a non-aggression principle and a non-interventionist principle. But that, of course, is not the case because he's not a non-interventionist. But, it is certainly better than the position that Hillary holds. But when you look at Hillary's record, she's been very much involved. We know what her record's all about in Libya and how much she's been involved. And her close associations with what went on in Ukraine and with the State Department and the people supporting, the West against the East and against the Russian, Victoria Nuland and Robert Kagan. These are notorious neocons, and she's really, really very close with them. They literally despise Russia and would do anything they could to precipitate a conflict with Russia. And also, they have in the past worked very hard to bring about a coup in Ukraine and prop up a new leader in that country. So I think it's really very clear the policy you would get from Hillary. Now Trump, on the surface, he gets criticized for being too friendly with Russia. But if you look closely at his policies, you don't know exactly where he's coming from, because the idea of commercial interests in being involved with Russia is not a far stretch. I mean, they have been their governments have been very much involved, like our governments have been, very much involved with big business interests, and certainly with the downfall of the Berlin Wall and the downfall of the Soviet system, there's been a lot of those things going on. So we don't know all the details of what might be going on and where this sympathy comes from, but it certainly is a better position than the one that Hillary holds on that. But if you want to look at Trump's associations where he might get advice on this, it does tell us a little bit. I mean, he has Rudy Giuliani as his advisor, and I think most people in this audience would realize that he wasn't exactly a non-interventionist. He's very, very aggressive on foreign policy. And John Bolton as an advisor. So just like some other positions that Trump holds, when he says some good things, you say, well, I hope he really believes in this. And then the next day he says something else. Certainly that is the case frequently on foreign policy about what he wants to do with NATO and what his real position is. So I'm skeptical, but like you mentioned in the introduction, I don't think if you took both of them at their word and with their record, you'd have to say that problems would be more likely promoted if you had a Hillary dealing with Russia rather than with Trump. But they still has to remain to be seen on just what happens.
Yes, next let's move to the part of the world that is bleeding our country dry, that is the Middle East. And unfortunately, both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton want to ramp up the military action there. Hillary is surrounded by people that want to go into Syria. And Donald Trump, while he says he doesn't want a nation build, he definitely wants to be active in the Middle East. So it doesn't look too good, does it, Dr. Paul?
No, and I think the way I see this is Hillary is very, very hawkish, and as is Trump on the Middle East. But I would think that Trump's rhetoric, gives us this impression of what he would do, because, he is adamant. I will do whatever is necessary, Obama or whatever. Now, Hillary would be more secretive and sneaky about it and be in denial, like this whole mess that she was involved in Libya, where weapons actually ended up in Syria. So she would be the kind that would work behind the scenes, but that would be very, very dangerous too. But Trump is very forward on it, and they are both very, very militant and hawkish on ISIS. But neither one of them will ask the question, well, how does ISIS come about? Is it a reflection, of our policy in some way? Is there such a thing as blowback? Is there ever a chance that we should move out of that region and have less troops there? And there's no signs that either one of them will do this. Though Trump is not for nation building, he is very adamant. We will not desert our friends, our neighbors, and we will defend the region, and it will cost money, but of course we'll get paid for it because we'll take their oil. And the way I understand his position, he literally would endorse the principle of if it's necessary, we'll just go into a country and get their oil if necessary. So I would say that the Middle East is going to be still very, very dangerous with either one of them. Hillary probably is much more in bed, openly so with NATO. But what that means is that with our control of NATO, we can pretend that NATO is with us, whether it's whether it's on Ukraine or whether it's Afghanistan and these other areas. Trump has taken a position which he knows is a popular position, and that is, NATO, we shouldn't be messing around with NATO, and even hints with getting rid of it. But at other times, he is very much wanting to say, well, we'll get NATO to do this. We'll work with NATO and accomplish some of these foreign policy position, and we'll make those NATO countries pay us. We will be the mercenaries, and we will do it. We'll work with NATO, and as long as they pay us the bill, we will work with it. So they're so far removed from a policy of non-interventionism and one design that is there to protect our national security, because I see, and so many other libertarians see, that what we're doing there is not in our best interest. Financially, it's a menace, and for our military safety and for the potential harm from radical Islam. All our presence there has made it worse, because when you think about what the Middle East was like before 9/11, we were there, and that helped precipitate 9/11. But since then, it's gotten much worse, because we've occupied so many countries, we're in so many wars, and that is continuing. I want to know which one is most likely to bring the troops home and get out of the business of running the remaking of the Middle East. And right now, I would say neither one.
Next, let's go to the major producers in the world, and that is over in Asia and China. And Donald Trump has long railed against the Chinese and is threatening tariffs and sanctions. And oftentimes, throughout history, when goods don't cross borders, militaries do. On the other side, Hillary Clinton has been tough on China over the South China Sea. A bunch of rocks out there. So what do you think about this, Dr. Paul?
Well, if you go by rhetoric, Trump is the most dangerous, and combine that with protectionism and blaming China for all our problems and our economic problems is all China's fault, and they're rigging their currency, and he wants to put on tariffs. He poses probably a greater danger. But like you mentioned, she's been really tough. I mean, she's part of that group that says, send our Navy over there, show them who's boss. And these islands that they're dredging up and developing, well, that's significant. We can't be ignored. But who's it affecting the most? Well, the Philippines, South Vietnam, they're participating in that. The neighborhood there should deal with it. Japan probably has an interest in it. But that's on the other side of the world. Why do we have to make that decision? I do not see that in the near future, or even whether that's the plan for China to disrupt the international flow of traffic, commerce in that region. It's not going to happen unless we stir up trouble and somebody sinks a ship and there's a false flag incident or something like that. But China depends tremendously on trade through that area, as we do. That's why I was so happy with the change of policy with China way back in Nixon's time, to open up the door with trade. As bad as they were and as communistic as they still remain, it's still nothing like it was when I was very much aware of this, getting to be draftable age back when I was in high school, when the Korean War was going on. So things are so much better there. So that's why I don't like this idea of protectionism. I don't like the idea of, well, just send our battleships over there, send our aircraft carriers over there, show them that we won't put up with anything. And they better be careful on dredging another 1 mile long island. And we are the deciders of all these things. I think both policies are very bad. And once again, I would suggest that the American people study and understand why a policy of non-intervention does not diminish our national defense. And a policy of intervention and telling everybody else what to do is a threat to our national security and is a threat to our financial security, because we cannot, continue to do this. And both of the candidates are very much in favor of rebuilding the military. We spend more than almost everybody else put together, and they're claiming, well, we need to rebuild the military and we need to upgrade our nuclear arsenal. It just goes on, and the people in this country just say, yeah, but if you drain our economy and make us so weak that we can't even feed ourselves and we don't have jobs and we have to depend on a government program and a government printing press, which is limited, it's not going to work. So yes, they're both very much for spending a lot more money in the military-industrial complex, whether it's the Middle East or Asia or Europe, wherever. It's like, don't ever say anything about cutting a nickel out of the military budget. And I didn't say defense budget. It has nothing to do with national defense. As a matter of fact, my point is, it's a distraction from national defense. It's a militaristic government that really controls things in Washington. Tremendous power. One of the most powerful lobbying groups in Washington. And Republicans or Democrats, you want to see some universal agreements. And if you want people to have bipartisanship in Washington, you should be very happy. Just look at the military budget. And if anybody criticizes it, you're un-American. You don't care about the troops, and you want to undermine our national defense. And that, to me, is a very important issue. And unfortunately, I don't see any solution from either of these candidates.
Finally, Dr. Paul, we'll talk about the ideas that drive both of them. We obviously advocate non-intervention and peace. Hillary Clinton wears the blinders of American exceptionalism. I have a quick quote here where she says, "The United States is an exceptional nation. I believe we are still Lincoln's last best hope on earth. We're still Reagan's shining city on the hill." Donald Trump doesn't really have those blinders on. He's more of a broad statement that he says America first. So what are your thoughts about this, Dr. Paul?
Well, I think both of them believe we're an exceptional nation. I think almost all Americans would believe we're exceptional in some ways, especially in our history. We've had exceptional success in emphasizing, the principles of free enterprise and free markets, and at one time sound money. But this idea of exceptionalism is a ploy to put a guilt trip on anybody who would disagree with what they're doing, because Hillary would claim, well, we're spreading Americans' greatness, and we have this responsibility. We are the moral nation. And that just isn't true, because we're using force and violence and guns and intimidation to have our way and have our will. I see those who, try to capitalize on this idea of exceptionalism as Jacobins. The Jacobins, the American Jacobins, or the neo-Jacobins, the real Jacobins, were the ones who, during the French Revolution, which followed our revolution, they wanted to have their exceptional nation too, of democracy, but they developed this intimidation and aggression to be used on their people, and saying, well, if you're not for us, then you're against us. And we heard that used frequently against the American people. And then it became violent. And of course, the French Revolution doesn't have, a good history. And it was all done in the name of exceptionalism. If you're going to do the right thing, and if not, we're going to use violence on you. And I think this is so deceptive and dishonest to say that if you're not for American exceptionalism and going abroad, spreading our goodness, then you're un-American. And Trump doesn't use those terms at all. Because he's not an internationalist. She's an internationalist that wants to make it very, very well known that we participate and we do this, but we are the declared leaders of the world, and therefore we're going to do all these good things. But if you're a very, very strong, adamant nationalist, you do it because American is the greatest. But he's not bashful. He's not bashful in any way about using force. When that incident occurred in France, where it was a terrorist attack, he was ready to go to war. His immediate reaction was, "Let's go bomb them." Well, that's a little bit over the top for me. And he would consider that instead of calling that American exceptionalist, he'd call it American toughness, because he wants a tough America, and that we'll take care of ourselves, and we will not let anybody push us around, and we will, put the tariffs on them, and we will not be bashful in the use of force. So I I would think that the ideas are different between the two, but I think this notion of American exceptionalism is used way too much. What I want America to be is an exceptional nation because the people believe and understand and want their government to give us a nation designed for the one very special purpose, protection of individual liberty. And that would mean that we would be an exceptional nation. We would be the freest and the most prosperous nation, and we would be friends with any nation that wanted to be friends. We would trade with people who wanted to trade, and we would have entangling alliances with none. And by the way, I stole that quote and paraphrased that from Jefferson. Yes, that would be an exceptional nation. Tragically, I don't think we're on the verge of becoming that exceptional nation. I get discouraged, except when I talk to supporters and people who are interested in this, because the numbers are growing. And if there's any one sincere wish that I have and something I work for, they talk so much about the millennials, is for the millennials to adapt and understand why it's in their best interest for us to have a better economic condition and more chance for peace and prosperity if we have a nation that is working toward an American exceptionalism completely different than that being proposed to us today in this current campaign. Chris, I want to thank you very much for being with us today on our program, Mythbusters.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul.
And I want to thank our audience for being with us today, and please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube, and RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Go check him out, subscribe. Now, I've said this basically this whole election cycle, I've been saying this, that you basically have two people with radical ideas that have been proven not to work, that are dismissing the lessons that had been learned over so much history, that a lot of those were meant to be remedied during the creation of this country. Now, many people, conspiracies run rampant on the founding fathers, but there's a lot of evidence, a lot of personal evidence that really shows who these people were, and they definitely were flawed in many different ways. But when they set out to create this nation, they believed that they weren't full libertarian. Even the libertarian leaning, mostly leaning people were not fully libertarian, for the simple reason that as long as foreign governments stand, they did not feel that they could have a full libertarian type philosophy, even though they might not call it libertarian back then. The philosophy of freedom was discussed plenty, and they just, many of them, the ones that were the more what we would call today libertarian, which back then would have been liberal, which we would now call classical liberal or libertarian leaning, they understood freedom. They understood the idea of a free society. Hence why when they decided, hey, but we do have other governments, we do have foreign governments. So when they created the federal government, it was to be sovereign states that in a time of distress would come together as the United States. This was something that was done for that reason, despite many conspiracy theories. Now, there were others that believed there should be a state. There were others that believed that we should start a new kingdom. But the majority did have a pretty good understanding why they fought against Britain, and that they had to be careful in creating a new form of government, one that could not become, well, basically what it's become today. And a lot of that's because we go, well, the Second Amendment, it means what it says, except for when you decide you want a fully automatic weapon, or a rocket launcher, or a artillery piece, or a tank, or a fighter jet. You know, it applied to everything up till that, you know, and then that only lays the groundwork for them to come in and go, the Second Amendment was written, but they had muskets, so you can have as many muskets as you want, but you can't have a semi-automatic weapon, even though, if you look back, they were starting to create semi-automatic weapons back then. At least tinkering with the idea. When, in reality, the Second Amendment was written exactly how it was meant to be written. There's no but in the Second Amendment. If they wanted a but, you got to realize they did have warships. They had ships with cannons. When they wrote the Second Amendment, they understood what they had. At that time, if you decided you wanted to build a ship and put a cannon on it, guess what you were doing? You were building a ship and putting a cannon on it. They understood. So when you have the conspiracy theories out there about, oh, you know, they wrote it to become exactly what it's become, that's why they left loopholes. Well, actually, the loopholes they left only became loopholes is because of the redefining of meanings to turn those parts in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, into, well, it meant that, you know, we can manipulate it up to a certain point. They redefine it to mean that they're allowed to do this. And, you know, this happened in more modern than, you know, the Revolutionary War and the founding of the country. This happened in recent history where you had alcohol prohibition. What did they do to outlaw alcohol? They had amendment. Yeah, because they understood what the, you know, Constitution and Bill of Rights said. They didn't try to, at that point, manipulate it. What they did do was use it to alter. And even that can be argued whether they properly used it. Because again, that should fall back to the states. Something the federal government should have been involved in. But anyways, then they repealed it because they found out, well, that prohibition doesn't work. But then here's where the part where they change definitions of meanings. And they launch, what did they launch? The war on drugs. Hold on. To outlaw alcohol, they had to have passed an amendment, and to re-legalize it, they had to repeal the amendment. But when they decided to outlaw a plant, let's say marijuana, since marijuana, you literally don't have to do anything to it, unlike, cocaine where it has to be processed up to a certain point. To outlaw a plant that literally would grow and you cut it down. They didn't pass the amendment, but outlawing alcohol, they had to pass a amendment when really they wanted to. They could have maybe regulated certain processes in making alcohol to a point that it's not profitable. So think about that. They change meanings. And then if you believe those redefined meanings, then you look at the Constitution and you go, well, it was set up to become what it's become. It was set up to be able to be overtaken. Okay. Now I've been trying to find the CBS clip with the Trump campaign person. I'm still kind of looking for it here. And let me see here. Now let's see if we can actually find it. Okay, I did find it. Okay. I have to play this because it really depicts exactly the bias media is using. And I'm not a Trump supporter at all. Okay. Now, we know how politicians talk and all this, so we know the answers aren't going to be exactly what we want. But neither are they from the other side of the aisle. But they don't get into it the way they do with Trump's campaign manager. So here's Trump's campaign manager on CBS this morning. Then we'll play Tim Kaine on CBS this morning. And remember, Kaine is one of the candidates. This is just Trump's campaign manager. And look how they belittle her and praise Kaine. Well, this is complete bias. And people know that I'm biased. I'm biased towards freedom. I want more freedom. I believe the Constitution is a step in the right direction, but it's not complete freedom. But I'm willing to go the constitutional route to get to freedom rather than some violent revolution that'll probably not end up in freedom, just some other corrupt system. But I'm biased on both sides. I don't care if it's a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, Constitutional Party, Independent. I'm biased towards freedom, so if they don't support freedom, that's things I call out. But again, CBS is very Democratic leaning, and it was on full display this morning. But let me go ahead and play this. Trump's campaign manager on Iraq war for Putin in North Korea.
Defending controversial foreign policy comments he made in Wednesday's candidate forum. He stood by his view that Russian President Vladimir Putin is a stronger leader than President Obama. Other Republicans have strongly objected to that. Trump also defended this comment about the Iraq war.
To hear Hillary Clinton say that I was not against the war in Iraq. I was totally against the war in Iraq. You can look at.
But listen to what Trump said on the radio with Howard Stern in September 2002, before the war began.
Are you for invading Iraq?
Yeah, I guess so.
Kellyanne Conway, Donald Trump's campaign manager, is here in Studio 57. Welcome.
That was quick.
So was Donald Trump for the Iraq war or against it?
He was a private citizen who was against the Iraq war. You heard him with Howard Stern say, yeah, I guess so. Had he been in the United States Senate, he would have casted a vote against the Iraq war.
How do we know that?
Because he said so. The same thing that Senator Obama said he would have done in 2008, and everybody just took him at his word.
But the point is, as you know, he constantly says, I was always against the war. Here he says, I guess I would support it. That's a contradiction.
Not really, Charlie, and here's why. He's on a radio show. Hillary Clinton went into the well of the United States Senate representing this state of New York and cast a vote in favor of the Iraq war.
But this is not about Hillary Clinton, it's about Donald Trump and what he said, because she has acknowledged that vote and acknowledged it was a mistake. He has not, and he wants to have it both ways.
He has acknowledged that her vote in the Iraq war was a mistake. He agrees with her that it was a mistake.
No, but he has not acknowledged that at one point he said he was for the war. Why can't he simply say that? At one point I was, and then I changed my mind.
Because there are other public statements that he made contemporaneously with that, including the Esquire magazine interview where he gives a much longer answer about why he thinks it was a bad idea. And he's very clear now about how it did not work. It was a disaster. And it cost thousands of American lives. It cost trillions of dollars to this country, and most Americans agree with him. This is a contrast choice election. I think the choice on who was there voting for the Iraq war and causing our men and women to go over there and agreeing with the Bush view of going to war was Hillary Clinton. She was in the United States Senate.
Kellyanne, let me ask you, why does Donald Trump and Mike Pence keep praising Vladimir Putin?
They're not praising them. So he's not praising them so much as saying that we'll work with people, anybody who wants to help stop the advance of ISIS will be welcome in a Trump-Pence administration to do so.
No, you say that he's a stronger leader than Barack Obama seems to be praising Vladimir Putin.
What he said was he's seen as stronger in his country, and he also said, if you pull the whole quote, he said he doesn't agree with that form of government, but that in that country, Vladimir Putin is stronger. It's very simple, Gail, in that as president, he would like to not do a Russia reset. I mean, that was a disastrous idea, really embarrassing if you go back and look at the clip of Hillary Clinton walking over with some reset gadget.
Maybe this is a better way to ask it. What do you mean he's been a stronger leader? What does that mean, that Vladimir Putin has been a stronger leader than Barack Obama?
He said, what Mr. Trump said is that Vladimir Putin was a stronger leader in Russia based on a system that he does not agree with, if you look at the full quote. However, he's saying that the man... I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan said that Putin is an aggressor that does not share our interests. Senator Lindsey Graham said Trump is, quote, making the mistake of the ages by thinking like and agreeing with Vladimir Putin.
They're misreading the quote then.
Okay, then why would Donald Trump do an interview with Russian TV that is sponsored by the Kremlin?
He actually did an interview with Larry King, a personal friend of his, a friend of, I'm sure, everyone around the table. And he said he was doing it for his podcast, didn't know it would be on Russian TV. But what he said there was...
How does something like that happen, that the campaign doesn't know that his words are going to be played on Kremlin State TV? Larry King was doing the interview for Kremlin State TV.
For his podcast. I wasn't involved in that interview. However, I will tell you that he was doing it as a favor to his friend Larry King, and it was Larry King has a podcast. But the point is the same. But the point is the same. It's that one of the two candidates running for president as we speak was the Secretary of State, was a United States Senator. He has been a private citizen expressing his views. It is her record that people are scrutinizing now. She made terrible decisions. She went.
And if you could see the table, you got old man Charlie Rose over there, and Gail and I forget the other lady's name, but they're just like looking at her like, what about this? What about this? What do you mean? Like, really, like, kind of. I would almost have to call it out if I was in her seat. And I think I would call it out because there's plenty of older interviews on CBS where they're not going after anybody on the left that way. And I would have to call it out. Like, okay, first off, let's learn how to, talk to people and not try to belittle as you're speaking to them just because you disagree with their side. Let's first start off there. Definitely being a so-called journalist. They're not journalists. Not in those sense they aren't. Just like in this sense right now, I'm not being a journalist. I'm a, political commentator, a philosophical commentator. I comment on the news on this broadcast, but I also have done journalism on the other side of that. They don't claim that this is a commentary. They believe that they're doing journalism, but the way they're doing it is very, very lopsided. So don't call it journalism. If you're going on this show, CBS This Morning, you're going on a show of commentators with a bias that are trying to fly under the banner of journalism. And you'll see that once I get to the Tim Kaine part. But I want to finish this one.
Against the military brass when they said don't do Libya. She went against the military brass when people wanted her to recognize Boko Haram as a terrorist organization. They've used innocent little girls as suicide shields.
I mean, you keep referring to her, and we will talk about her record when her running mate is here later in this program. Just one last question. North Korea. What would Donald Trump do if North Korea has ballistic missiles that can carry nuclear weapons to the continental United States?
He wouldn't do what's being done now with the president over in Asia talking about Donald Trump instead of really talking about North Korea.
You always refer to what the Democrats are doing. What would he do? He wants to be president. What would he do if North Korea had the capacity to deliver a nuclear weapon to the United States?
Donald Trump would be, first of all, his entire America First campaign doctrine is that he would always look out for the interests of this country. And North Korea and the rest of the world would know, Charlie, that President Trump and Vice President Pence aren't messing around with anybody who's trying to threaten our lives. I mean, the generals that I hear and the national security experts that I hear talk about nuclear capability being nothing short of devastating.
North Korea if they had the capacity?
Would it be diplomatic or military response?
He would make sure that they would never use it.
How?
He's not going to reveal all of his plans now. He's made that very clear. And maybe somebody can ask him in a debate. But the fact is that this entire world would be put on notice that there's a strong leader in the White House. There would be no failures in Syria, in Libya, in Benghazi. There would be no Russian reset. There would be no advance of ISIS, who our own president called the JV team.
But Kellyanne, he doesn't want to reveal his plans. How can voters make a decision if they don't know what he says he will fight ISIS and he will take care of ISIS, but he said, I don't want the enemy to know what I'm going to do. How can voters make an informed decision if they don't know how he's going to do this?
The informed decision, Gail, is we already know what she would do. I mean, President Obama called ISIS the JV team, said they were being contained right on the eve of them exactly executing another awful attack on innocent people in Europe. And so the birth and growth of ISIS happened in the last 3 years alone. You have 33,000 people killed since 2003 between ISIS and its predecessor groups. 80% of those murders have happened just in the last 3 years. So people will say, who was there when that happened? And can we do something different with stronger leadership?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you see there, kind of lopsided. Oh, you can't see it. Well, let me pull up Kaine's interview. because this is very revealing. Hopefully, I can get it with the whole intro. CBS News doesn't have it with the full intro. Okay, I think I have it with the full intro. This is how Tim Kaine's interview. Okay, and he's not even, running for president. He's vice president. But he is one of the nominees. And that was the campaign manager you heard previously of Trump's. But no real big, insurance or, not saying really anything about it. But let's hear what they want to start off with for Tim Kaine's interview. The same day on the same show. And tell me if this is not biased. That this is not extremely lopsided. And again, they have a journalist in the newsroom to start this off.
Meanwhile, this coming Monday, CBSN will be bringing you live reports from the new Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington. We're going to take a look at the history of the museum itself, in fact, as well as the important events that it does commemorate. And here to discuss his experiences as the mayor of Richmond, Virginia, once the capital of the Confederacy, is Senator and Vice Presidential nominee Tim Kaine. Of course, when he was mayor, Kaine offered the first formal apology for Richmond's role in the slave trade. And when he was governor of the state of Virginia, it became the first state to apologize for slavery. And the Democratic vice presidential nominee, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, good enough to join me now here on set. Senator, it's great to have you.
You bet, Josh. Great to be with you.
We do want to get to some news of the day in just a moment, but I want to begin with the National Museum of African American History and Culture that will be opening. What does it mean?
This might not be. Showed the right picture for the right clip, but doesn't look like it's the right one here. Give me a second here and I'll get the right one pulled up. Okay. Now I have the right one. There we go. Now I don't know if this has the intro. Hopefully it does. Okay. Here we go.
We're looking forward to a special day on Monday. CBS This Morning will come to you from the new Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington. We'll talk with many special guests about the museum's own history and the important events that it commemorates.
And only on CBS This Morning, here to discuss his experience as a former mayor of Richmond, Virginia, once the capital of the Confederacy, is Senator Tim Kaine. The Democratic vice presidential candidate, when he was mayor, Kaine offered the first formal apology for Richmond's role in the slave trade. He was Virginia's governor in 2007 when it became the first state to apologize for slavery. Kaine was a civil rights lawyer who joined Richmond City Council in 1994, and he earned a reputation as a bridge builder at a time when the city's racial divisions were still quite stark. Senator Tim Kaine, we welcome you to the table at CBS this morning.
Thanks. So nice to be here with you this morning.
Here. So an apology twice. Why did you think that was necessary? Very unusual for many people.
Richmond is a beautiful city. I've been there 32 years, but we've got history and we got scar tissue. And one of the bits of scar tissue we have is that we were one of the centers of the slave trade in the United States. First slaves came into the English colonies in Jamestown in 1619. Richmond became one of the centers of the slave trade. And it wasn't just that the city was a bystander. The officialdom in the city defended and really promoted the institution of slavery. And I thought it was important for the mayor to offer an apology, not to end a discussion, but to start a discussion. And I felt the same way when I became governor.
Should the president?
Look, I think it's a good thing to do. I think it's a good thing to do because it opens up a discussion. The thing that's exciting about the museum, many things exciting about the museum opening is, again, it will be a generator of discussion about stories that haven't been told, and wounds that still last to today.
And in many ways, you have to acknowledge the past and embrace the past before you can move to the future.
Faulkner said something great. He said, history is the attempt to create a usable past. If it's just about the past, well, maybe you don't spend that much time on it. But I do think we can use the past in the right way. It was a Virginian Jefferson who said our North Star as a nation is going to be equality. Even though he wasn't living that way, even though no one was living that way, they were still smart enough to say that will be our North Star. And we've been a nation orienting towards that and sometimes away from it. But more often than not, thank goodness, orienting towards it ever since, knocking down one barrier after the next. A sailor never gets to the North Star and will never be perfect.
Should there be a legislative remedy? In other words, should there be reparations for descendants of slaves?
I definitely think, look, the weight of discrimination in the country, if you look at 400 years since Africans came as slaves to Jamestown, divided into 8 half centuries. For 5 of the 8 half centuries, Africans were here as slaves. For 2 of the 8 half centuries, there was legalized, separate but equal, legalized discrimination even though slavery had been outlawed. And only for the last half century have African Americans been entitled legally to equality. So the weight of that is very, very consequential. I've tended to focus on things. How can we address the weight of it? And I've tended to focus on things like education strategies and investments, and that's what Hillary Clinton believes too. I think you acknowledge the consequences, but then you try to solve them through investments in communities that have been left behind. In Virginia, sadly, we had a school system, Prince Edward County, that closed their entire school system for years rather than integrate. Governor Warner and I worked together with legislators to create a scholarship so that even 50 and 60-year-olds who hadn't been able to get the education they wanted to, if they wanted to go and get an education now, the state would help pay for that. And I think educational investments to raise human capital is part of what we do to deal with the consequences that still exist today.
There are many who look at slavery and its legacy and say it's a direct line to that and the conflict between communities, especially the black community, and law enforcement.
There are connections there. There definitely are connections. But I'll tell you, in a lot of communities, the police and community relationship, it gets it right. When I was elected to city council in Richmond, we had the second highest homicide rate in the United States, and the homicides were largely in our minority communities. We had to make law enforcement changes and build bonds and build ties, and many communities do that, but some don't.
Yeah, but that's the question. How do you deal with those who don't?
Well, look, we have to push communities to embrace what I call a community policing model, where they try to deal with crime by building stronger ties. And then the other thing we have to do, Charlie, this is really important. We've made police and sheriffs, in many instances, sadly, the front line for mental health problems in the country because we don't treat mental health. So many of the instances that become flashpoints, if you get to the bottom of it, there's a mental health issue, sometimes diagnosed but untreated mental health. And I have sheriffs who talk to me all the time. I don't want to have a jail where 2/3 of the people here really aren't criminals. They're mentally ill, but because we don't treat mental illness, they end up doing something wrong and in jail. So solving this problem, you got to build better relations and have more mental health care.
Your running mate has a very different idea about mass incarceration than her husband did when he was president.
A long time ago, sure. I think we've learned from painful experience that as a nation, we are so far out of whack with the rest of the world in the way we use incarceration. We have to dramatically change that. And so Hillary and I both strongly support criminal justice reform, which isn't just about sentencing. It's also about
recognizing the mistakes that happened in the 90s.
Yes, she's acknowledged, look, the crime bill in 94. It had consequences that went farther than we wanted. We've got to roll that back. And I think there is some bipartisan interest in doing this now.
Before we move on to news of the day and the campaign, I'd love to know your thoughts about this museum opening up, because I know you've seen it.
Yeah.
We can't wait to go live and actually be inside it, and what it represents and what it means.
It's a people's museum. In 2019, we will commemorate 400 years of the arrival of African Americans into the English colonies at Jamestown, 1619. And as I said, if you look at that history, it's only been in the last 50 years that African Americans of the entire 400 have been entitled to legal equality. There's a lot of pain to that story, but there's a lot of triumph overcoming adversity. The cool thing about the museum, and I know the director, is Lonnie is just
been working for 10 years.
Yes.
So the Smithsonian has had a great collection that will be used, but they've also gone out to families and said, give us memorabilia. It's going to be a people's museum. And I think it will be a great generator of conversations that we need to have as a nation.
Can we get to some of the news of the day? Your contemporary, the one you're running against, Mike Pence, said yesterday that he thinks it's inarguable that Vladimir Putin has been a stronger leader in this country than Barack Obama has been in this country.
Nora, my heart sunk when I heard this, because what about invading other countries as leadership? What about running your economy into the ground as leadership? What about persecuting LGBT Russians as leadership? What about setting up journalists and imprisoning them and even killing them as leadership? There's a difference between dictatorship and leadership. And if you don't understand that, you wouldn't get out of a 5th grade civics exam if you don't understand the difference between dictatorship and leadership. It also demonstrates just an irrational hostility toward President Obama that I don't get. How anybody could look at a Vladimir Putin. Because of state-run doping scandal, they just banned all Russian athletes, even Paralympians, from the Olympics. That's not leadership. But saying that Putin is a better leader than President Obama, I think it just betrays an irrationality and a hostility toward the president that is unpatriotic.
Do you think that the Russians are trying to hack into not only the DNC,
absolutely,
in order to influence the election? That they want to see Donald Trump elected because they think they'll get a better deal with him?
Well, first, Charlie, it's very clear that the Russians were behind the DNC attack.
And their motive?
At a minimum, it's to delegitimize the election. At a minimum, it's that. But remember, when a presidential candidate encouraged crooks to commit espionage against the DNC in a presidential year to gain an edge, we impeached Richard Nixon and he resigned. When Donald Trump went on the air publicly and said to the Russians, hey, go ahead and hack away, and if you find something that helps me out, let me have it, we impeached a president for that, what he has encouraged Russia to do.
You got your first intelligence briefing yesterday. The news today, North Korea has launched a possible 5th nuclear test. What would President Clinton do to prevent North Korea from sending a ballistic warhead to the United States?
Well, a couple of things. First, I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, and we worked on the sanctions package that the Congress adopted and then the UN adopted, giving the president very vigorous sanctions tools. So I know Hillary Clinton is going to use that sanctions power to the utmost to really squeeze those who are supplying North Korea. That's number one. Second, we have to get other nations engaged. China has put out a statement condemning this nuclear attack. They don't want instability on their border, and I think this is a wake-up call for them, and we have to demand that they use their influence. And third, the last thing we should do is be cavalier about nations getting nuclear weapons. Hillary has been very involved in trying to control nuclear weapons as Secretary of State. Donald Trump has said, well, maybe more nations, Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Korea, maybe more nations should get nuclear weapons. That would be a disaster for the world. We're going to control nukes, not allow them to proliferate.
Yesterday, Senator Kaine, Mike Pence said that he has a stand-in for you getting ready for the debates. Who's your stand-in, and how are you getting ready?
The stand-in is the most closely guarded secret. But getting ready. I've done a lot of debates. I'll tell you, this is a different one because it's not really Senator Pence v. Kaine.
We have to go.
Yeah, it's Clinton v. Trump.
Elaine Quijano from CBS is moderating. I know we got to go.
It's going to be challenging.
I know we got to go.
Thank you, guys. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Hope you'll come back. Be sure to tune in this Monday, September 12th, when CBS This Morning will broadcast live.
Now, see the complete bias in these two different interviews? They never challenged him on, and he's talking about, invading countries and blah, blah. Okay, never challenged him on, well, we might have not invaded, but we helped destroy Libya. We know CIA was possibly using Benghazi as the gun running. They said that guns were being, grabbed up from rebels, but there's evidence suggesting that, well, maybe they were just turning around giving them to other rebels, hoping those rebels were truly on our side. Which we see, how many guns of ours, tanks, Humvees, tents, food rations, surface to air, grenades, who knows what else, are now in the hands of ISIS. And Hillary, being Secretary of State when Benghazi happened, so much stuff they could have, brought up to him. What about this? They praised him, they praised her, they praised how, he talked about how, Hillary's position basically has changed, and they go, yeah, she's, come to understand, it's straight. Well, when the campaign manager for Trump, when they played that little clip that abruptly ended on Howard Stern, going, yeah, I guess so. It cuts off right there. And then they berate her and belittle her responses. Very lopsided. And this, how much I'm not a Trump supporter, that upset me. That right there upset me. Now, see, I would be harsh to everyone. Even if it was Ron Paul up there, there's issues I have with Ron Paul. I know no one's perfect, but I think that really a way of looking at philosophy and practicality in the current situation, there are certain steps that I believe must be taken to get and gain more freedom. They are essential for anything else to be able to come to a situation where you can grow freedom in all the different aspects that government currently is head deep in. You must have a certain foundation. And it doesn't matter, if it was Clinton, Obama, Bush, Trump, Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, they would all get the same treatment. And I'm not going to berate one person over the other. When you're running for, it's not like you're just interviewing an organization that you believe is doing good. This is voting on someone that can hold a position that can either turn your government into a tyrannical beast or the protector of freedom. And right now we have that tyrannical beast right now. And really, I just don't see any candidate that would be anywhere close to successful in putting any type of foundation in to grow freedom. And I really should do a broadcast on a foundation for freedom. The the grounds that you have to lay in our current political system to make it a lot harder for them to create a tyrannical structure. Not only will it make it hard for them to go beyond, it would make it imperative that they go towards freedom. And without that foundation, you're just not going to get there. It will not happen. And right now, what we basically, even if Rand Paul would have been running, I would not have looked at him as someone that, again, I would have agreed that would have been able to put that foundation. The one thing I think he would have been good for is more of a psychological tool that could bring people and more people in society into the philosophy of freedom. Maybe even looking at, more of his father's stuff. Ron Paul's got the Ron Paul Liberty Report. You have Campaign for Liberty. You have a lot of other organizations that Ron Paul's been involved in and spoke at, and I think that only just could open the door to possibilities in the future. And you're not going to be able to vote your way to freedom. I think this is something that you have to personally find freedom within your own life and grow it outwards from yourself into your community, into your local governments. And again, start at your local level is always the best bet. And like I said, county sheriff, you can secure the most amount of freedom with the proper local people involved. And we've seen where the sheriff in multiple places, even here in Indiana, has stood up in between the citizens and the federal government organizations. I think it was FDA or something here. But they can stop the intrusion, the tyrannical ploys. And we've even had sheriffs that have been fired for standing up, towards the feds, basically. They find some BS loophole and try to charge them on, frivolous charges, and sometimes it succeeds. But you have to have the ones that are willing to do it. Now, give me a second here. Okay. Turn the time real quick. Okay. Now, I have one from We Are Change, and this is the biggest 2016 presidential campaign lies. And I want to cover this. But now there's someone out there that I'm not some huge fan of. but he says some off the wall stuff, reptilian people, I don't believe in reptilian people, flat earth and all that, but when it comes to philosophy and, looking at different types of paradigms, and David Icke actually is pretty well understood in that part, and it's amazing. Sometimes he things he says will just click in your head, and you have a different understanding. Doesn't mean you start believing in reptilian people or flat earth and all this, but it's pretty interesting. I think it helps with a lot of self-reflection. Some of the talks that he's had with Luke Radowski. So there's the interview up there. It's about a half hour long. Go check it out. It's pretty interesting. But I want to cover this, the biggest 2016 presidential campaign lies from We Are Change. Here we go.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. They might seem like they have different foreign policies, but the tactics they use are more similar than you might think. Let's take a look at some of the biggest fear-mongering lies that have become instrumental parts of both Clinton's and Trump's campaigns. When it comes to fear-mongering, Clinton focuses on two trigger words: ISIS and Russia. So when it comes to ISIS, Clinton talks about how the terrorist group must be defeated by arming moderate rebels, just as Obama has done since she was Secretary of State. Clinton claims that it's the only way to defeat the deadly terrorists while saving American lives. But what she doesn't mention is that arming and training Syrian rebels was exactly what gave ISIS power and weapons in the first place. On Russia, Clinton has been an open critic of President Vladimir Putin for years. Instead of giving Russia credit for helping to defeat ISIS, Clinton has worked alongside neocons to make Putin's name synonymous with fear. And then there's Donald Trump. Now, when it comes to a fear-mongering foreign policy, his trigger words typically come in the form of countries such as Iran, China, Syria, and Iraq. And, of course, the phrase radical Islamic terrorism. From raving about the utter chaos in Iraq and Syria to claiming that Iran is on the brink of having access to nuclear weapons, listening to Donald Trump talk about geopolitical news will have you thinking that the world is on the brink of falling apart. And when it comes to radical Islamic terrorism, Trump panders to neocons by painting a picture of all-powerful terrorists that must be stopped using unconstitutional methods. One of Trump's biggest problems is that he typically uses incredibly vague statements such as "Make America Great Again," or "We will have so much winning if I am elected that you may get bored of winning." He has used over-exaggeration and fear-mongering so much throughout his campaign that it really raises the question, what means will he go through to actually defeat terrorism? So are Americans truly more unsafe now than ever before, and how big of a threat is terrorism? Well, while the risk of being killed in a terrorism-related attack has risen in countries such as Iraq, Syria, Pakistan, and Afghanistan in the last 5 years, the risk of being killed in a terrorist attack if you are an American pales in comparison. In fact, Americans are more likely to be killed in a car accident, crushed by unstable furniture, or to die from diseases such as cancer, diabetes, or Alzheimer's than they are to be killed in a terrorist attack. The art of fear-mongering didn't start with Clinton or Trump. It's a practice that has been passed down from one president to another. And in 2016, it's important for us to remember that if a presidential candidate is invoking fear in order to gain support, the results can't be good. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to share it on social media. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And if you'd like to see more videos like this one, subscribe to youtube.com/wearechange.
We Are Change on YouTube, wearechange.org. Check them out. Subscribe on YouTube. Now, like I've said before, a lot of fear mongering, and it's funny watching Hillary because she tries to fear monger off of the fear that Trump's pushing. Look at him fear-mongering. It will be devastating. Okay, both of you would be devastating, and more than likely we're going to get one of you. Again, we're not going to see, I believe, anything at the federal level come good out of this. I just don't see it happening. There's no one up there. You know, I honestly think right now, how I'm looking at things, how I'm looking at how well received Rand Paul was during the nomination process, I kind of wonder if Ron Paul was kind of our last hope for our time. And I don't want to believe that, because if that's true, we could end up with a lot of problems here. We absolutely need the libertarian-minded, even constitutional-minded type of people to really get out there and do something. Whether it's doing a talk show, a website, running for local office, and running for federal office. And when people like that stand up, it's kind of imperative that everybody that knows those people to truly be who they say they are, to get out there and use their voice, make videos together, put out a whole video paid for and done by everybody in the video, not associated with the campaign, and let people know, who this person is and how you know that they are who they say they are. I think that this election cycle might be your most imperative to get out and vote, definitely for your sheriff, your county sheriff. I think it's going to be extremely imperative that you do. Because otherwise, you might run into problems. Because either way I see it, I believe that we're going to end up seeing more of a power grab. And possibly more of a global power grab. And we might actually see that before the election is over. But I'm not sure. Now, give me a second here. Okay. Give me a second here. A little bit. issue here. Okay. Now, this is from AV or Alternative Media TV on YouTube, AM TV. And this is Matt Lauer, notable member of Clinton Foundation, scrubbed. And he posted this one a day ago. So we'll go ahead and dive into this.
Hey everybody, we are back. I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV. Alternative Media Television is, of course, Thursday, September 8, 2016. Let's dig into Matt Lauer. Matt Lauer, a notable member of the Clinton Foundation, now scrubbed. See, the mainstream media is trying to backtrack now, even though everybody knows, factually, without a shadow of a doubt, that Matt Lauer is a puppet of Hillary Clinton and a notable member of the Clinton money laundering scam that made up the Clintonista Foundation. You know, Hillary Clinton's been airing a lot of her dirty laundry, again, for a reason. She needs to get this out, like the big questions, the fact that she committed a criminal, illegal act with her email server. You know, what was it, up to 30,000 plus emails, all this classified material that she set up, answering the question about the header. You know, there wasn't a header, even though there was. And Julian Assange is followed up, you know, through WikiLeaks with actual damning evidence proving all this. By the way, we're waiting on a major bombshell, which he plans to be releasing teasers any day now. It could be happening right now. I talked about this in a previous video where he released the last bombshell that had Debbie Wasserman Schultz step down, which roiled the DNC, that proved that it was phony, that they were an attack dog working against actively Bernie Sanders, and that we do not have a political system in this country. We don't even have a two-party system. It's a one-party system. But she's been airing all of her dirty laundry, and I seriously laughed out loud last night. You know, I'm kind of like going through the stories and headlines today, and there's a video of Hillary Clinton. She speaks maybe for 10 seconds or something like that, where she opens up on CNN. She's got to air the dirty laundry about her scumbag accused rapist of a husband, Bill, who did not have sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky, even though he was, you know, doing things with a cigar that we probably shouldn't tell our children about. So she's got to air all of her dirty laundry. And we know this lady, Hillary, has no real emotions. She's not a real person, nor does she have real friends. But she goes on to say that she's opening up about the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and it's like this like tearful story about her eating ice cream and taking long walks with their friends. I was seriously cracking up. Let's go to that video.
How difficult was it to go through something so private, so personal, under the glare of the spotlight as the First Lady?
It was really hard. It was painful. And I was so supported by my friends. My friends just rallied around. They would come. They would try to make me laugh. They would recommend books to read. We'd go for long walks. We'd hang out, eat bad food. I mean, just the kinds of things you do with your friends.
And she's been asked this question many, many times. Hillary.
All right, guys, so there you had it, sharing out her dirty laundry. I mean, every marriage has problems. I mean, even Barack Obama sans his wedding ring right now in Laos, you know, shaking hands with Duterte, who called him a son of a whore. Everybody has marital problems. Maybe Obama's wife is going through some, you know, Bruce gender transition, if she hasn't already, which has been the speculation, because she kind of looks like a freaking man. But, you know, Hillary was just, you know, eating ice cream. She was eating Haagen-Dazs, you know, taking long walks with her girlfriends, of which she doesn't have any real friends. And we just know that this entire story is made up, you know, but she's got to play the victim card because that works to her advantage. Even when I was talking about in the last segment about the journalist asking, are you going to vote for Hillary or Trump? One of the things all the millennial females were saying, like, why Hillary? And all they could say was, I don't know. It would just be nice to have a woman as president. I've said this for years, that she's going to be president because she's got a vagina. Again, that's not sexist for me to talk about that, just a biological certainty. Well, not 100% certain, but at least she claims she's got a vagina. But all these millennials were like, well, I don't know. I don't have any real reason or anything. I know nothing about podtext. I just hear stuff in my ear. I'm doing bong rips, on the college campus right now, and sleeping with a lot of guys, but unprotected, and then having abortions and shit. But I just think it would be nice to have a woman. That's how dumb people are. And I'm dead serious. The same thing with Obama. He was black. So it's oh yeah, we got to have Oprah was there, tears shutting down her face. We got to have the first black guy. And now we've got to have the first female. Da-da-da, the first vagina of the United States. People are that dumb. They really are. So that's the basis for a lot of the voters, is that it would just be nice. It would be nice. Who cares if she's a freaking criminal? It would just be so nice. I mean, her husband cheated on her, and, she had to eat bonbons and ice cream and all this stuff. I can totally identify with that. I mean, Johnny over at the fraternity has been cheating on me for years. He also gave me the hip. I mean, people are just so dumb. I mean, in between the interviews, they were looking for Pokemons. I even met a nice kid at the grocery store last night. He was a really nice guy, but I asked him, he had water wings on. He just kind of looked like a freaking idiot. I'm like, hey, I'm picking up some water. I'm prepping. I keep a lot of this stuff on me. And I'm like, what does that mean, man? Why do you have water wings on? He's like, oh, it's a game that we're playing. Yeah, it's a water fight or something at his high school. I saw another guy at the gym the other day. He had a fanny pack, floating device for the pool. I mean, I'm sorry, dude. These kids nowadays, would you please read a book, for crying out loud? Stop searching for Pokemons and playing water sports, if you even know what that is, and wearing water wings in public. You look like a freaking retard. So anyways, Hillary Clinton's opened up. In fact, I don't even think we need to ask her any other questions. I mean, she's totally playing the victim, and, she uses the woman card to her advantage all the time. She's either a victim, or it's she's the first vagina in chief and she's a feminist, or she's pro-gay now in LGBTQ, binary and transitioning community, even though she was vehemently against it in years past. She was, I believe in the marriage between man and a woman, and a penis and a vagina just seem to go together better. And now it's oh no, I've turned, because the poll numbers indicate I'll get all those voters. Just like they're bringing all the immigrants over, because then they're granted amnesty, and then they vote Hillary because they get free shit, and it balloons the upside down pyramid until it collapses, and we burn to the ground like Rome, which is the trajectory and the path that we're on. But again, Hillary's got a vagina, so she's likely to win. And it would just be nice to have a female in there. It would just be a nice thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would just be nice for a change, Who cares about her politics? She's got a vagina. So critics blast Lauer, commander-in-chief, for performance. Twitter has a memo for NBC News, says, don't send Matt Lauer to do a political journalist job. They just go on and on. They're basically bashing him. Notable member of the Clinton Foundation. He fails to ask a single question about Hillary Clinton's pay-to-play foundation while she was working at the State Department as Secretary of State, while she was lying to the American public, saying it was an Innocence of Muslim video that started the not terror attack, according to Susan Rice and her people, even though she was sending emails to her daughter, Chelsea, at the same time, oh yeah, we had another, Al-Qaeda linked, terrorist attack here at September 11th at Benghazi. And they, refused to give support on the ground, even though weeks and months in advance, people were telling her, including Christopher Stevens, hey man, we better get some guns over here. I know we're trafficking a lot of them over to Syria right now to fund ISIS and, get these rebels on the ground to take over Assad and, kill people like Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. But we better get some guns on the ground or I'm going to die. And she just ignored it. And then he dies. And then she has the town hall yesterday. She's like, oh, no man's left behind in Libya. Even though these people are dead. You know, SEAL Team 6, you know, the guys that allegedly took out Osama bin Laden in their helicopter. Just random. Random event. Yeah, all those guys are dead too. Very convenient for the establishment narrative. So Liar fails to ask a single question to White House hopeful. It's not hopeful. She's going to win because it's rigged that way. The tables are turned. Fails to ask her a single question about the, major pay-to-play scandal that makes up the Clinton Foundation that pocketed and lined her pockets hundreds of millions of dollars in speaking fees, etc. Run by Bill, who has his own health problems right now, and then funneling all that money, pocketing it personally, taking all this tax money, etc., and paying Huma Abedin and all these people, etc. People said they thought maybe a pubic hair was the reason for the cop, because there's been speculation that the two ladies are lesbians. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just stating the truth as it is. Like a little hairball, in there. So Matt Lauer, liar. This is from Mediaite. I think that was from NBC down there on the ground. See, I just trash things. As I'm done with, I just trash. Listed as a notable member of the Clinton Foundation. Then it goes on here with NBC, says that the website of Proof was scrapped, according to the U.S. Herald. It appears that NBC is once again denying the obvious, which brings to mind the blockbuster film The Princess Bride, in which the villainous Vizzini utters the iconic line, inconceivable, and in which the hero, Inigo Montoya, replies, you keep using that word. I do not think that it means what you think it means. And then it goes on, basically scrubs the website of Proof. Moreover, much like the villainous character played by actor Wallace Shawn, NBC continues to deny Lauer's cozy relationship with the Clintons and as a donor to the Clinton Foundation. And then it just provides us proof that, again, they scrapped the website because the mainstream media doesn't want you to know the truth, that he's working for her, and the whole thing's staged, as all the debates are staged. And September 26th at Hofstra University is staged. And all these interviews with Anderson Cooper are staged. And CNN is staged. It's why they always have, 3 or 4 people there, and there's like one Trump supporter to like 4 pro-Clintonista clan people who are just, hoping to get a part of like her cabinet or something someday or work for her because they know she's a certainty and they just bash the Trump supporter. Staged. All of it staged. YouTube and Google is becoming a cat video site. Staged. Demonetized, censored, banned. Staged. They've got to control the media. It can't be the Wild West. If they can't spoon feed the bullshit down the throats, the propaganda down the mouths of the American people, keep them spending, taking out credit card debt and all this shit, mortgages, 0% rates, all these things. They can't keep them going, making their minimum payments each month. We've got a major problem. The whole system collapses overnight. It comes to an end. We've seen it before. We saw it in 2008 and 2009 with the total collapse of the U.S. stock market, the economic system, and every major banking cartel in the world. Engineered and then needing trillions of dollars. Because, again, if they can't spoon feed through the media and the propaganda machine, through commercialization, all these things, the American people, that's why they've got to censor and bring down the internet and transfer it over to the UN. The whole thing comes to a grinding halt. It all ends overnight. We're finished. We're done. America collapses. It goes into just a ball of flames. The modern day fall of Rome. More evidence about Hillary's hacking, coughing. Again, the mainstream media is now, Hillary is now attacking even the mainstream media, picking up this story, warning the media to tread carefully. She says, tread carefully on this story for political operatives. Don't report the truth. Or, you know what, maybe we'll just shut down parts of the mainstream media now. Because, again, she owns the media. Not she specifically, but the people that own her and the puppet masters that own her and that play her like one of these characters. George Soros at the top. I can't believe that guy's still alive. And Hillary's dancing around like this with her earpieces, and, coughing. Those are the people in control. Those are the people in power. Those are the people responsible for the destabilization effort with immigration and these things. transitioning America into a radical leftist nation so that it doesn't even look like what it was founded. Founding fathers rolling over in their graves. These are the people calling the shots that own the first vagina and thief that makes up Hillary, Rotten, Clinton. We've got to go to a quick break. Facebook, ask your question. Put it in the comment box below. Thank you for liking us. We'll be right back after these messages.
And no, he won't. Now, really, we look at the whole nomination process, all of what happened throughout that. I don't think we can look at it as anything else but a circus at the national level. It's when we look at the Republican debates, we've seen the media push to stir things up. No real issues brought up. It'll be very, very interesting to see how any debates go between Clinton and Trump. Be very, very zoned in on the media and how they use it. I don't think you can look at either candidate and actually go, I really care what they say. If you want to vote for one of them, go ahead. I don't think any of my listeners would. Hopefully not. But if you're voting for Trump just because you think without that Hillary has a chance of getting in, then I can't bash you for trying to stop Hillary, because Trump is the uncertain candidate. You don't know exactly what's going to happen under Trump. With Hillary, you know what's going to happen. So I really couldn't bash anybody. If you're going to vote Gary Johnson just because you think he's a libertarian enough and you don't see Republican or Democrat as someone that's, viable for your personal principles, then I'm not going to bash you for that. If you believe in what, that Trump's going to bring freedom, you believe in him, and you think he's going to be a positive for America, I'm not going to bash you. But I think with Hillary, I think she's had enough time. You know what she's going to do. It's hard to side with someone that would go Hillary. I don't see a legitimate argument for Hillary. Now, if you believe in freedom. Now, if you believe in, this group of people being above this group of people, and, you actually think you're a elitist, that they're not going to throw you under the bus, then I guess you would vote for Hillary. I don't see any of my listeners doing that. So, yeah, I think it's just going to be an interesting future, and I think that people should be prepared. Now, Hillary's health that's being questioned, I think there's a legitimate need to question her health. I think there's enough evidence suggesting her health is not the greatest. Definitely, this coughing fit is not something that has just started up. It's been going on forever. I believe I see tics. I believe she has tics that are noticeable. Maybe it's just her awkwardness, but I believe it to be tics. I'm not a medical expert or nothing, so, it's just personal opinion. But I think it should be questioned, and there has been some doctors that have come out and questioned for help. And I haven't really been using much of InfoWars stuff, but they did have an article, if I can find it quick, that I wanted to cover. The reason I've kind of stayed away from InfoWars is they've been doing a lot of bashing of Gary Johnson, which, some of what they do isn't bashing. I think they do bring up legitimate issues, but the way they've done it has kind of been interesting. And, Alex is a big Trump supporter. Again, if he truly believes in Trump, then I guess, this might even benefit him. I don't know. But I've been disagreeing with a lot of what he's put out, so I haven't had really a lot to share. But there's still a lot of legitimate articles up there that I do probably need to read more of. Now, they had a couple that I've seen today. Now, this is a report out of give me a second, it's loading here. Trying to get this covered. AAPS, Infowars.com, Hillary's health concerns serious, says most doctors polled by the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. 71% of doctors say Hillary's health concerns are serious and could be disqualifying. AAPS. Concerns about Hillary Clinton's health are serious, could be disqualifying for the position of President of the U.S., say nearly 71% of 250 physicians responding to an informal internet survey by the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, AAPS. About 20% said concerns were likely overblown, but should be addressed by full release of medical records. Only 2.7% responded that they were just a political attack. I have confidence in the letter from her physician and see no cause for concern. 2.7% said that. While more than 81% were aware of her history of a concussion, only 59% were aware of cerebral sinus thrombosis, and 52% of the history of deep venous thrombosis. More than 78% said the health concerns had received not enough emphasis in the media, and only 2.7% that there had been too much emphasis. Nearly 2/3 said a physician who had a concern about a candidate's fitness to serve for health reasons should make the concerns known to the public. Only 11% said a physician should keep silent unless he had personally examined the patient, and 10% that the candidate's health was off limits for public discussion. Now remember, they were going after who? Oh yeah, Ron Paul. Are you too old? Are you in good health? As he was going on daily bike rides and runs. 88 respondents submitted comments. One said that the public interest will always override either privacy rights or rights of self-determination in the case of a presidential candidate. Another mentioned Clinton's so-called loss of memory claim during the FBI questioning about her email server. Beyond the specific questions, one remarked that I think that the candidate should be honest with the public about his or her health. The history of the concussion was concerning. The public must watch the movie Concussion to realize that such an injury does affect thought process. A poll of 833 random selected registered voters by Gravis Marketing showed that nearly half, 49%, were not aware of the well-documented major health issue that Hillary Clinton has. Nearly 3/4, 74%, were unaware of Bill Clinton's statement that Hillary suffered a terrible concussion requiring 6 months of serious work to get over. The majority, 57%, thought that candidates should release their medical records. Both physicians and other voters think that health concerns are relevant when choosing a presidential candidate, states AAPS Executive Director Jane M. Orient, medical doctor. However, more than 40% of physician respondents were unaware of the cerebral sinus thrombosis, and the vast majority of voters were not aware of all of Clinton's problems on their potential serious long-term implications of cognitive function. The Association of American Physicians Surgeons is a national organization representing physicians in virtually all specialties in every state. Founded in 1943, AAPS has the motto Omnia Pro Agrita, which means all for the patient. Again, that article is up at Infowars.com. I really do question her health, and you know, if her health is this bad, why would she even be running? There's something going on, I believe. I think there's enough evidence that it says that there's something going on. And then you have many doctors saying that it probably should be looked at. I think that says a lot. Where would that leave us? I think it would leave us with a Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, and Trump in a debate. And that would just be to give airtime. I don't think she's going to give up, but does that maybe even show that someone else is going to be running the show? Many speculate that she had an earpiece in during that forum. Possibly. Kind of looks like an earpiece. So we can look at all these issues, but for a lot of the supporters, they don't care. A lot of Trump supporters don't care what you say. They're already in, all in. And I think a lot of them are just as radical as the candidates, if not even more radical. Some were just drawn in by fear and emotion. But I think there's a large base on both sides that just really have an agenda. They believe in something, but they really don't even, you start asking them actual technical questions and they fall apart. They get mad. We've seen it with a lot of ones on the left, but we've also seen it with a lot of ones on the right. And it's not just a small section. There's a pretty decent size in that. They've brought the crazies out this election season. They've truly brought the crazies out. So different from when the stir in the pot happened back in the 08 election, or, back in 07, 06, when people started getting behind Ron Paul and the movement, and people actually talking about philosophy, politics, talking about, monetary policy, the Federal Reserve, people actually were bringing up actual technical issues and having strong, factual information to back up their beliefs. We need I think we need to find a new way to reach the youth. And with technology changing, we need to pioneer something that it's not happening yet, but when it happens, it's going to take off. We need to be that pioneer, and we need to be able to slide the philosophy of freedom into it. And I think we win in the long run. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I'm trying to finish up some projects. I started these projects a long time ago, so I'm just trying to piece them back together. I've had a lot of stuff go on, so trying to get everything relaunched. So I'm working on these projects, slowly getting them back together. But hopefully we can air those soon. A lot of new changes coming through. If you really want to help alternative media out, when you want this message to spread with the platforms we have now, we have great platforms like UCY.tv. It's an avenue with many different opinions and philosophies, but all is to really free the individual. So you can always support UCY. If you go to UCY.tv, scroll down to the bottom, click Amazon. Many people shop Amazon. Check it out. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv.
keep it alive. Through these lines, I keep it live.